As we've been reporting, Democrats and Republicans remain at odds when it comes to more aid for Ukraine. President Biden's current request includes money for Ukraine, Israel, and U.S. border security. But some Republicans aren't fully on board with the bill, saying they want to see more policy changes at the border. CBS News reporting found that the White House is now open to some changes to get the Republicans on board. And so we turn to CBS News immigration reporter Camilo Montoya-Galvez, who can join us with some discussion about policy details. Camilo, so let's start. What do we know about what the White House, specifically on policy grounds, is willing perhaps to wiggle on now?
Hi, John. Good evening. We have learned here at CBS News that the White House and the Biden administration right now are willing to support some pretty sweeping and drastic limits on asylum and changes to U.S. border policy in order to get Republicans on board in terms of supporting additional military aid to Ukraine as part of this negotiation over the president's emergency funding requests. These changes and proposals include a new expulsion authority, John, that would allow border officials to summarily return migrants to Mexico or to their home countries without processing their asylum claims. It would work similar to that Title 42 pandemic policy that ended in the spring of this year, but it would be implemented without a connected public health justification, John. There's this other proposal that the administration is entertaining that would mandate the detention of those migrants who would be allowed to seek asylum. And then finally, I also learned that the White House is open to supporting a nationwide expansion of a process known as expedited removal. It's a fast-track deportation program that allows agents to deport migrants without court hearings if they don't ask for asylum or if they fail those initial asylum screenings. So all of this represents a pretty extraordinary reversal in policy by the Biden administration. Just a few years ago, President Biden campaigned on overturning many Trump administration policies that resemble some of the proposals that his administration is now considering, John.
Well, yes, exactly. That struck me, Camilo. So let me understand, in terms of asylum, though, doesn't the U.S. have obligations to international treaties, to laws in terms of treating asylum seekers differently than they do migrants who are not seeking asylum? And how would these get around those limitations?
Right. Under U.S. and international refugee law, the U.S. has a legal obligation, John, to hear the claims of people who are on American soil and who request humanitarian protection, regardless of whether they cross into the country illegally. That, from what I understand, will not change, but the administration is open to creating a new authority that would allow the Department of Homeland Security to effectively suspend the U.S. asylum law when a certain threshold is met in terms of illegal crossings. And so that obligation would be suspended when there is a spike in border crossings, from what I was told based on these conversations, John. So again, it is a sweeping change, very similar to Title 42, a policy that was enacted by the Trump administration at the outset of the pandemic.
And the expulsion authorities for those who make asylum claims, it seems like you and I have talked before about the need for more judges to adjudicate these asylum claims. It seems like they're sort of doing what they do sometimes in overloaded cities with cases. They put them on a rocket docket. I mean, they just have people deciding very quickly, kind of shrinks the judicial process. So is that essentially what's happening here?
Yes and no. I mean, any change to U.S. asylum policy will only do so much to deal with the current situation at the border, because you still need to screen and interview migrants who ask for humanitarian protection if you're not expelling them. And so the administration would also need a simultaneous increase in the number of asylum officers, John, immigration judges, and detention space to screen and detain those who are requesting asylum and who are being allowed into the country pending the adjudication of those claims. And this supplemental request that the president has made does include billions of dollars to hire those additional immigration officials and to increase detention capacity. So it's not about policy per se, it's about both policy and increased resources, John.
Finally, Camilo, you mentioned that this was a sweeping change for the White House. Do you think it will meet the policy requirements of the bulk of Republicans? And then I'll bolt onto that. Are Democrats going to be unhappy about this policy change?
Well, these are all changes, John, that Republicans in the Senate support. They want to see drastic limits on asylum and expedited deportations to increase in order to try to reduce the unprecedented levels of migration along the border. However, it is unclear if Republicans in the House will believe that this is enough, because they passed an immigration bill, H.R. 2, earlier this year, John, that included much stricter provisions, including a return to the so-called Remain in Mexico policy, the reinstatement of detention for families with children, and most importantly, an end to the humanitarian parole authority, which is that law that the administration has been using to admit hundreds of thousands of refugees from Afghanistan, Latin America, and Ukraine. And so these provisions are not, from what I understand, something that the Biden administration would support. So it's unclear, even if the Senate negotiations come to fruition and there is a deal, that House Republicans would be willing to support it, John.
Camilo Montoya-Galvez with fresh reporting. Thank you so much, Camilo.
Thanks.